Hey guys, what's up? Charles Float here and welcome back to the fourth installment of Digital Gods. In this episode, I'm going to be talking to Mr. Mads Singers about his 250 plus VA operation in the Philippines, his entire management consultancy career, and as many tips and tricks as he's got for digital entrepreneurs and SEOs alike to manage their staff and employees and get as much efficiency out of them as possible. Stick around, this short but epic episode is going to be filled with tips and tricks that most SEO nerds are going to need in their paths to success. So today I'm joined by Mads Singers, who is a specialist in management coaching and virtual assistant management in general. So I'd like to just thank you for coming on the show and welcome you on the show, Mads.
Thank you very much, Charles. Awesome to be here.
And so just for those who don't know you, who don't know your background, who don't know what you're about and who you are, where have you come from? How did you get involved in virtual assistants and SEO? I'm guessing one may have led to the other.
Yeah, so I mean, my background was in corporate world, where I used to work for Xerox and IBM for many years and have done various sort of management roles and so on. Already while working corporately, around 2007, I started doing SEO myself. So started hiring Filipinos, starting getting them to write Philly English content. And yeah, they're not always the best results, but that's life. So that was basically when I started into SEO. So I left the corporate world in around 2013, 14. And basically at that point, I went totally on my own. I started out initially with management coaching and consulting, basically because most business owners don't have experience in managing people. And the problem is if you try and build a business without experience in managing people, you often get not so great results. So it's not something that's super easy to learn, and there's not generally a ton of super amazing training out there on it. So really my core passion is really helping business owners and their management teams really skill them up on management in general, right? So people management particularly. And that's sort of my core focus, and that's where I spend most of my time, right? So I also do a lot of management sort of coaching and consulting along the way, but really my passion is helping really upskill businesses from a management standpoint, right? But the problem is most people have had a bad manager at some point in their life, and if you have a bad boss, it's not because the boss want to be bad. It's typically just because they don't know how to do better. So that's basically sort of my management philosophy. Now, I own a whole bunch of companies now. So at this point, we started a VA company where we have probably a couple of hundred VAs or so at this point. And that's been running since 2016, maybe. And then we have we have our in-house SEO company where basically we just build and grow affiliate and ad sites for monetization and then fix and flip and sell. So we do that quite a bit. And then we have with last year during Corona, we started a virtual events company. So we currently run an event called the SEO Mastery Summit twice a year. And that one we're up to about 10,000 people on the event at the moment. So big event. We usually have 40 plus speakers every single time. So that's also a lot of fun. And then lastly, at the beginning of 2021, I bought into a content company because we were churning out a lot of sites. We needed a lot of content, and it was hard to get it the right way and get it consistently from one source. So basically, I ended up buying into a content company, and that have also been great. So basically, all the companies, or most of the companies I'm involved with at least, are sort of in and around SEO in one way or another, right?
Yeah, so I just want to talk to you more about that kind of VA company that you had, because you have such a remote staff. Do you have anywhere you're primarily based? And you said you mentioned COVID as well, and the pandemic in general. With you being such a nomadic traveler yourself, where have you been based during COVID, and where has your company been based? Have you moved more remote? Have you moved more towards office based? Where have you been based? Where's your company been based?
So I would say we, from an outsourcing company point of view, we moved slightly more remote. I mean, we've always been primarily remote, so 80, 90%. We've had an office in the Philippines specifically, and obviously during COVID we couldn't use that for a long time, so we ended up just ending the lease because no point in paying for an office if you can't use it. And the people got so used to working from home anyway, right? So we primarily had the office for like trainings and stuff like that, because sometimes it's just a little bit easier to train people face to face. But it was really just a value add for me, often physically being in the Philippines. It wasn't really a necessity in any way, right? So during COVID specifically, I ended up sort of getting stuck, if you will, in Vietnam for a year and a half, which was great. Haven't spent a year and a half in one country for 20 some years, so that was a bit claustrophobic, but compared to how the rest of the world was doing, I was blessed, so I tried not to complain too much about it. So
yeah, I'm guessing the time in Saigon was not too bad in comparison to a lot of other times, or a lot of the places that you could have been in the world. So back onto the VA management kind of stuff. The number one question I get in relation to VAs, and the number one question I get from my audience in relation to VAs, is where to find them. So where do you primarily source your VAs? Where do they come from? Are they locally sourced? Do you do them online? Where are you getting your VAs from?
Yeah, so I mean there's many ways to find them, right? So obviously we have a VA recruitment company, and we have people that are literally looking for candidates full time, right? So one of the key things for me, if you are a business owner yourself, like you probably don't want to spend hundreds of hours trying to look for potential candidates, right? So typically for us, I'll say if you're an online business owner yourself, something like Online Jobs PH is probably a good place for most roles, just because you can go in, post a job, and you'll get a bunch of people come to you. A couple of key things is, whenever you're recruiting, create a separate email address. You don't want like 500 CVs coming into your regular email box. That is not what you're looking for, and it will screw you up, and it will mean you can't keep control of it and stuff. So whenever you're recruiting, create a separate like jobs ad or whatever email, just to be able to separate it out. That will save you a lot of headaches. But yeah, that's a good way. Now, for us, because we have people doing this, right? Again, if you're running a company, you have a HR or something. The key areas for us is basically Facebook groups. So particularly in Philippines, but in a lot of Asia, Facebook groups are big. They're important, and a lot of people, they might not even have ability to have data on their phone, but most companies in Philippines, you can still use Facebook, right? So you can literally use Facebook no matter what in the Philippines in most cases. So Facebook is big. Also, we use LinkedIn a lot. LinkedIn is great because you can search for specific people with specific skill sets. So, like let's say you're looking for someone who knows Ahrefs, or that's probably pretty broad, but someone that knows like a particular tool, or someone that's like, on-page expert or something. Like you can search very specifically in LinkedIn. And you can also, at the same time, you can also search for physical location, right? So LinkedIn is a good sort of way of searching as well. But the challenge with LinkedIn and manual search is that it takes a long time. But when you have recruiters or HR that have time, that can be a great way to do it as well. You can also post jobs on LinkedIn, and that's actually become better and better over the years. So that's also an option. But that's typically some of the avenues we go down.
Yeah, so generally when you're posting these online jobs and things, like you said, you do get 500, if not 1,000 or thousands of applicants. How do you go about during the interview process, and potentially the picking before the interview process? How do you go about finding the right person for the right job?
So recruitment is like sales. You're basically wanting to build a sales funnel. So you get a lot of people in at the top. And really what I recommend is, particularly if you're putting up job ads and get 100 applications, you want to try and automate as much as you can of the process to actually weed out candidates. So you always want to look at everything else being equal, which means so basically look at things that what will make you more likely to be successful. So some of the things that could be simple is like typing tests, for example, like how fast a person types. So if you actually, you can set up like with Google or whatever, you can set up automations, and you can literally send every candidate a test saying, hey, thank you for applying for the job. We want to get you to do this test, and then literally get them to do a typing test. Everything else being equal, if someone is faster at typing, like if you have 500 candidates, and if you take the 250 or 100 highest, 100 fastest typers, everything else being equal, they will probably be more successful, because the more comfortable you are with a keyboard, the more comfortable you are with a computer, the more likely you'll be successful in an online job. Then you can do, again, depending on what's important. Like sometimes we do grammar tests, sometimes we do IT tests. So we love, like, again, setting people like 10 questions of even computery stuff, because again, what we find is, particularly for SEO, if people understand computers, if they know, have an understanding of hardware and stuff like that, everything else being equal, they're probably going to be better at the job, because most people who are good at SEO tend to be nerdy IT guys, right? Or girls. So those are the kind of things. So basically, the more automatic testing you can program into a workflow to basically sort out people, so that you really end up with a smaller pool of candidates where your likelihood to be successful is much higher, the better off you are, right? Because if you have 500 candidates, and you start picking random people, your chance of getting a great person is probably 2 out of 10 or something, right? Whereas when you automatically bring it down with filters that make sense for the job, your odds might increase to 5 out of 10 or something. And basically the point at every step is you can potentially sort out people that could be great, but the whole point is that everything else being equal, you're more likely to have successful people when they go through various testing. And one of the key things that most people don't understand is that the harder it is to get a job, the more people appreciate it, and the more likely they are to stick around for it. Sometimes people are afraid to make the interview process too complicated, but really that's an excuse for laziness. Because reality is, the more complicated you make an interview process, the better employees you will have. So even since the beginning, like if you wanted a job with Google, you go through like 7 interviews or something, at least, right? And that's because they know and they understand that if they want the best people, they want people that really want to work for them, that really want that job, and that are willing to do what it takes to get a job, or to get that job at least, then, the higher the barrier to entry, the better people you will get.
Yeah, and you said that, and I completely agree with that. You said that most SEOs are kind of nerdy introverts, in the house, not exactly the best at leading a team and management and that kind of thing in general. That's what I will say is probably the biggest value add you have in the SEO industry, is making people actually better at managing and actually better at building teams, and that whole lot that most SEOs just intrinsically aren't very good at. So what are the most common issues you see specifically with SEOs and online marketers when it comes to leading and managing a remote team? What are the most common issues that you see that with the mistakes that they make?
So number one is definitely delegation. I mean, when I work with SEO companies, the number one issue is generally lack of ability to delegate effectively. And fundamentally, what happens is, when you're dealing with people who are perfectionists and detail oriented, what happens is that they actually hold back the progress of their staff, because they're so eager to make every decision. They're so eager to do everything themselves. And a lot of the time, I meet people who say, "Oh, I've had staff for 2 years." I'm like, "Why don't you delegate to them?" And they're like, "Well, they're not good enough." Well, if they're not good enough, it's because you haven't been delegating enough to them, so they have learned more stuff. The problem is that, typically what happens is you learn a bunch of stuff, so you're at a decent level. You hire someone new. They don't start out at 0, because you have processes, you have stuff, so they start out here. The problem is, if you don't delegate and give them responsibility, what happens is you grow faster than they grow, and the gap between the two of you keeps being very high. Whereas when you actually start delegating successfully and effectively, and delegate actual responsibility, what happens is they grow, and over time they become better than you were at that particular task, right? Because again, everything else being equal, if someone spent their entire day doing internal linking, or spend their entire day doing outreach or whatever, like eventually they should become better than you if they know what they're doing, right? So that delegation is definitely the number one thing. That the second thing is also that many nerds are afraid of people. And the thing is, if you want to be effective with other people, actually talking to them and communicating to them is important. And I've met people that have literally had employees for 5+ years, that I've only ever talked to them in Skype chat. I'm like, if you want the most out of your staff, that's not the way to manage them. right? So that was a couple at least.
Yeah, no, that's awesomely helpful, and I totally agree as well that even I've been kind of bad with myself at delegating things, and just blowing up at people and not helping them and all that kind of stuff. I 100% agree that I need to try and delegate more stuff to more people and take some stuff off my own plate, let alone giving more stuff to myself. So speaking about remote staff and having employees, it's kind of harder when you're dealing with people online that you've potentially never met. You might still be paying their wages and still be paying them, through their life and stuff, but keeping them on and having that kind of high churn rate, especially in an industry like SEO and like online marketing and stuff, where you have that high churn rate anyway, and especially in 2022 and 2021, where we've dealt with this, the great resignation, as people keep on calling it, and it's been all over the media, so with people moving jobs, swapping jobs, that kind of thing. So how do you deal, or how would we deal, and how would SEOs deal with the kind of churn of remote staff and making sure that we retain those remote staff as much as possible?
So we have a couple of hundred staff, and we probably had 2 resignations last year. And again, it comes down to treating people properly, managing them well. Reality is, and one of the biggest problem with remote staff is that people treat them as remote staff. Like, the thing is, if they treated, if they have a guy sitting in Birmingham and they have 3 guys sitting in the Philippines, if they treated those people the same, they would get significantly better result. But the problem is, because people pay a bit less, they treat the employees significantly different. And the thing is, I mean, you and I have common friends that have literally built $1 million businesses on the back of only Filipinos. So as example, like Kurt Phillip, for example, pretty much his entire team, like his entire management team, everything is Filipinos. And he have taken the time. I mean, it's taken him a couple of years to build up a company, but he have built an extremely successful company, right? And you can get people that are just as capable as anyone you'll find in the UK or in the US or whatever in the Philippines, right? But it's about managing them right. It's about developing them right, just as it is in the UK. Like, you can go out and hire people in the UK that are absolutely useless. So it's not like, oh, this person is abroad, therefore they're not very good. Like, it's 100% up to, yes, you have to hire the right people in the first place. That obviously makes life a lot easier. But when you have the right people, then it's very, very much a question of how do you manage them? How do you delegate? How do you give them more responsibility? And how do you grow them, right? So
yeah, and if you're dealing with a specific area, or if you are sourcing, like you said, if you're primarily sourcing all of your VAs from one spot, one place, the Philippines, people sourcing from Macedonia, India, the whole kind of a range of lower wage countries. Still, as you said, extremely highly talented. However, they do kind of treat them not as well as the other staff, like you said. I do want to ask you, though, is it, if you are dealing with a specific area, specific country, that kind of thing, is it beneficial to kind of get more of an understanding of their culture so that you can address them better, talk to them better, understand their problems and understand their issues and stuff better, and also understand how you can benefit them more?
Sure. I mean, understanding people is always better, right? Like, the more time you get to spend on understanding people and the culture and where they're coming from, and again, like, when you're looking at the UK, there's also a million different cultures, right? Just as if you look at the Philippines, but there's obviously things that are slightly different, and just cultural norms and so on that are just slightly different, right? And it benefits from knowing them. But if you turn the table around, I've seen amazing managers who have only worked with American staff previously, who've gone on to manage big teams of Filipinos and have continued to do amazingly, right? So again, the whole thing is that a lot of it is about learning how to manage people well. And actually, the best example, when we first started out, our VA business was a referral business. So we basically charge a one-off fee to find you a great VA. And, we did that for over a year. And we realized in the end, like, 95% of people didn't last 6 months. And I was like, what on earth? Like, I'd hired like about 20 in-house already with me, and they all lost it. So I knew, like, stuff can happen with individuals, right? But I know there's no chance that 95% of those people we had helped people find were no good. And we realized that the problem is not the people found, in most cases at least. It's the people managing those people. And what happened was we changed our model completely. So now basically the model is we help find great staff. And then we help manage all the personal stuff. So people just have to tell them what to do and how to do it. That's the focus, right? So that way we kind of take all the other like personal stuff and my grandma's sick and it's my son's 4th birthday and all that kind of stuff. We take all that away. And now the people that work with us, they basically just need to tell people what to do and how to do it. And as I said, like right now, out of a couple of hundred people, we had 2 resignations last year, right? So our attrition rate is extremely low. So yeah, that's.
Yeah, so it's all just about how you treat people and learning to kind of give people the most so you get the most out of them, kind of, right? So yeah,
that's the key thing. And the whole thing is people look at management and most clients that come to me say, I don't really want to manage people. I don't like managing people. And it's just, it's like someone looking at SEO for the first time. The first day you looked at SEO, it looked big, it looked scary, it looked impossible, right? The reason why most people don't like managing is they don't know what they're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing and you don't feel good at something, like, yeah, you're not going to enjoy it. But like I've worked with, I would say pretty much every single client I've worked with have turned around their mindset over time because they understand the value of being able to do things through other people instead of having to do it all yourself. Right. I mean, even like a common friend of ours, like Matt Diggity, for example, like he was one of those people that literally told me on the first day saying, I don't like working with people. I don't like managing people. I can promise you today, there's nothing he loves more than just managing people, seeing stuff happen without him having to do it. Right. And that's that's the transition most people go through. And here's the thing. Most people think management is super complex and it will take years to develop. Like basically, like I have a simple course and it's literally 5 hours worth of video, right? 5 hours. Now, obviously, you need to implement. So it's not just 5 hours and you're good forever, but it's 5 hours. Like that's literally it. Like if you can listen to that, if you can implement what I say in those 5 hours, you'll be within top 10, at least top 20 of managers around the world. And not because my stuff is necessarily like mind-blowing amazing, but just because most people anywhere in the world are not trained well in management, right?
And you've just kind of perfectly put me onto my last question there, which is how can people find you? How can people hire you to get one-on-one consultant services, and where can they access this 5 hour course of yours?
Yeah, so madssingers.com, so MADSSINGERS.com. That's the best place to find all of this stuff. So that I have my course, I have information about consulting and so on. And yeah, that's definitely the best place to find it. And fundamentally, again, I would say the key thing for most people is just spend more time with your staff, spend less time doing stuff. The more time you spend doing stuff and not with your staff, the more you are growing and you're developing, not your staff.
Well, thank you for coming on, Mads, and I'll sure to have you again in maybe the next season or something. And I'm sure a lot of people took a lot of value out of that, because I know that management is one of the biggest problems that most people have when it comes to going on their own, freelancing, agency building, that kind of stuff. So I'd like to thank you once again for coming on, and I'd let anybody go, and I'd recommend anybody to go through all of your management training as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Charles. It was awesome being here.